Yeah, we're very grateful to the British Computer Society to host us here today. This is our second Flux Social here. It's also our concluding event of the Access All Area exhibition. And today is all about virtual practices, hybrid practices. In fact, we've got 3 prolific speakers that we will introduce shortly. And before we do so, just a bit about Flux for those of you who are reasonably new to us and who might not know us. And then we will talk a little bit about the format of the night. So before I get started, just a bit about me. Oh, the clicker is working. Yeah. So, I am one of the 3 co-founders of Flux. My name is Olive Gingrich. I'm a curator, an artist, a researcher. I'm currently a lecturer at Greenwich University. My research interests are all about participatory art. So this idea of interactive forms of art. I work a lot with visual sound and with holographic installations. You can see one of my holograms outside. There's also a really strong interest in my practice in exactly this subject, so in hybrid practices. So I've just recently published a paper on this that is going to be published at Leonardo magazine. Well, it's coming out this October, actually. And who are we? So Flux exists since 2016. We have initially started at the Lights Soho Gallery in Soho. We came together with this idea of founding a community or creating a safe space really for artists to exchange ideas, to discuss their objectives, to share their knowledge, but also really to build a bit of a support network for each other. So over the last years, we've done this quite successfully. So we've started with 36 different artists, and now there's about 3,000 artists who are all interconnected, who are linked to each other through Flux. What we're trying to do is, with this platform, not just to connect artists with each other, but also to connect artists to the public and also to public institutions. So we have a lot of different partners who we've worked with. The Computer Art Society, the British Computer Society are 2 of them. We've also worked with the V&A, with Barbican, Lumen Art Projects, and these are just some of the partners that we've worked with over the last years. One of the partners is the National Gallery X, which is also where we're having our next event that we will talk about in a bit. With this, I'm going to hand over to Maria.
Thank you, Ole. Thank you everyone for being here today again. It's so nice to be back at physical, even although hybrid, events. This is how we started in 2017, and although we kept through the whole pandemic, we kept doing events, virtual events. There is something impossible to replace from being in a room with everyone. So that already makes me happy. So for the ones that you don't know me, I'm Maria Almena. I'm a curator and founder at Flux, and also a creative director at Kimatica Studio. I explore the intersection between interactive technology, live performance, and the human body in order to create transformative experiences. I've got some artworks also outside, particularly my new work with augmented reality performances that I call Metaverse Divinations. And also a 3D Pinterest sculpture that you might have seen over there. So I'd like to start by presenting the socials. I mean, this is one of our socials. This is how Art in Flux started. We started with our Flux social events because we just wanted a place for everyone to come together and to socialize. Simple as that, right? But we wanted to for it to be a place where people, artists, practitioners can come to exchange ideas and to support each other. We felt there was a lack in London of a place, a hub for like media artists. And we wanted to also like kind of have the control of it, and not being dependent of like organizations, where we could be flexible, we could be free, and we could just exchange, you know, however we please. So as Olive have said, this is the second Flux Social we are doing here at the British Computer Society as a wrap-up of our Access All Areas exhibition. But this is always a way, if any practitioner or artist is interested in coming to or joining the Flux family, or coming to our Flux Social is always like the best entry point, is when we are more flexible and we're open for people to ask questions or share anything they like to share. We also, as the three of us, we have our own curatorial interest. We decided to also do some curated talks, and we've done many throughout the last 4 years. And they are always curated around our particular the themes, our particular interest of themes. And we have the last curated talks have been happening with the National Gallery. Just before the pandemic, we got a residency with them, and we've hosted 7 events with them. They all have been online. But actually, for curated talks, we thought the format worked quite well. So we've done run events on heritage, on health, on transcendence, on ecology, on gender, and on data. So all these events, they're actually at the National Gallery website and also in Art in Flux website. So if you want to rewatch them, they are there. So the legacy stays on those platforms. And now I'm going to pass it over to
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So very, very pleased to be here again with you all socially. Very nice. So I'm Asha Shemza. I'm curator and director at Art in Flux, and also an artist myself. I make light sculptures, and I'm also the manager of the estate of my grandfather's works as well. And Jalal Shemza. So you'll see some of my works in the other room. I have a keen interest in interactive and participatory artwork. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about our personal practices and how our works have changed really in the last couple of years to have this hybrid practice that we'll be talking about a bit more. So Art in Flux, we not only wanted to bring media artists together and connect media artists with the public, and institutions, we also wanted to connect the public and with media art and make media art and digital technologies accessible to everybody. So we've been bringing in young people to do workshops with us to learn about how you make media art, and doing curators tours, demystifying what it means to be an artist, so professional practice, how can you survive as an artist, what you might want to do. If you're in A-levels, maybe you want to do foundation art, maybe then you want to go to university, maybe you don't want to do that, you want to do something completely different. So thinking about all those different ideas of professional practice. And of course, exhibitions is really important. As we're all media artists, we want to showcase our work. So we've been producing exhibitions in real life with all sorts of different technologies. So VR, AI, body tracking, EEG, using EEG monitors, and we've worked with, so here we've got the Event 2 exhibition, which happened at the Royal College of Art and was in collaboration with the Computer Arts Society. This is a lovely work of Paul Friedlander here, who's in the room today with us.
It's a dancing wave. It doesn't just stand still. People have seen it in action.
Yes, it's kind of
very kinetic
and moving. And we have Andy Lomas's work at the top here at the V&A, and William Latham here with the VR work at Event 2 as well. And then in the last couple of years, we've also started doing virtual exhibitions. So we have Chris on the call virtually, who designed our Art in Flux Reclaimed exhibition. So he'll be talking a little bit more about that, and we'll go a little bit more into what our process and how our journey through doing that, because we didn't know how to do it 2 years ago. So we've learned and grown, and we want to share that process with you. So now I'll hand back over to Olive to talk a bit more about the actual event.
Yeah, so we have 3 fantastic speakers lined up for you today. Tanya, who's here in the audience, and we've got Chris McGuinness and Danielle Caswicciali, who are joining us online. It's a hybrid event. Yeah, and before inviting the speakers to talk about their practices, we thought we're going to share a bit about our own practices with you and the challenges that we face as Art in Flux, but also as individual artists. Yeah, and just a bit of context. Ever since this idea of hybrid art started to emerge, and Tanya is going to talk a lot more about that. So this idea of net art and the journey that we've been going through, there's been challenges also around how to make this art accessible, right? So how do you create virtual experiences that actually translate the physical into virtual world, or maybe are something that are larger than some of its parts. And so there's questions around grammar and language and navigation and how you navigate these new experiences. So yeah, hopefully we can deconstruct some of these challenges today and think about together and exchange ideas also with your own experiences in this context. My personal experience as an artist, as I said before, I work as part of an art collective called Analima Group, and we're interested in visual sound experiences. And actually we had a residency also at National Gallery X just before the first lockdown, and were thrown in a bit at the deep end because I think the 20th of March in 2020 was supposed to be the kind of launch date of our exhibition, and that was the first day of lockdown. So we had to very quickly reconsider entirely how we're going to present this exhibition to the public. And it was supposed to be a real light experience, completely immersive. You're surrounded by the lights and you're stepping into this kind of cone of light, and our experience is some of the paintings within the National Gallery as color harmonies, as a visual sound experience. So obviously this wasn't really possible, and we had to reconsider and come up with, in our case, it was a 360 visual sound piece that works both on your phone, but also with VR headsets, and that is accessible to everybody at home. So for us, this was quite a challenge because we had never worked in that way. We're all media artists, but to translate a physical artwork into a completely virtual experience, yeah, was more difficult than we thought originally. What worked really well was suddenly it became accessible to everybody at home. So this was the first time in over 75 years that the National Gallery was closed, so that the doors were actually physically closed to the National Gallery, and people at home were able to just experience the piece from the comfort of their sofas. The challenge for us is that when we think about new media, we're not necessarily considering everybody. So especially people who are who have accessibility needs, right? Abled artists is sometimes something that you don't immediately think about. And so we, after creating these 3 art experiences that were really successful and we had thousands of visitors, we kind of took a step back to think how we can make these artworks accessible. And so that's something I'm doing right now. I'm working with RNIB and the National Gallery and redesigning these experiences and to think about facilitation of these artworks and how to make them accessible to people with accessibility needs, and in this case, visually impaired. Also with Art in Flux, we had our starting point was our very first event at the National Gallery, Gender Tech, which was themed around gender. Birgitta was exhibiting as part of this. And we didn't have any experience in putting on a virtual exhibition at the time. So it was a very new field for us. And this was our very first virtual exhibition. It was essentially a glorified website. And it was the starting point for us to think about how we can make these exhibitions a little bit more than just a 2-dimensional interface. And with that, I'll hand over.
Is that your slide?
Oh, that's me. So this was our second virtual exhibition, and this was more 3-dimensional. So this was for Ars Electronica, building on also an event that we did at National Gallery X. And here, this was the first time that you could actually navigate through these spaces. And it's a bit similar to the exhibition layout that you can see now as part of accessible areas. So you navigate through the space. You have the ability to zone in on different artworks. You can watch videos. You can see 3-dimensional artifacts. And obviously, it's a very different experience from just watching a website, essentially. So this is the first starting point of our journey. And yeah, we've evolved quite a bit since then.
Thank you, Olia. So yeah, I'm gonna start by talking a little bit about my practice as a media artist that I've been mainly focused on performance. You could imagine that going digital, on going virtual, it wasn't the most straightforward thing to do, as it literally there are two worlds that are like the opposite to each other. So I got some research funding from Arts Council to think about this and to see how could I virtualize and digitalize my experiences. And obviously I do performances working with technology, working with real-time interactive technology. One of the first challenges that we saw is like real-time interaction in the virtual world still is quite, you know, there is no, basically technology is not quite there just yet. And so there were already like so many restrictions. And I hate restrictions. I'm an artist. I like to, you know, to be free and to create and to you know, to see what is possible. So sometimes that's when like working in technology, it could be a bit challenging. So I'm gonna briefly talk about these two projects. I'm maybe gonna start with the one here, which is Simulacrum. Basically, this is Schematica's first ever performance, and you can see the image on the very top. That's just a photo of a live performance. We're using body tracking technology, and you create, you know, like it is a photo of a live performance, but it has a digital feel to it because you have the projection, right? And then when we were doing one of the events with the National Gallery, we were putting together a virtual exhibition, and I was like, how can I translate a performance piece into the virtual world? So that's when I created this piece. So this piece is the first time that I used photogrammetry. And basically I digitalized, that was actually myself. So I put myself in the costume, and then I just like took many photos around me on a still position, because that was the first, at first I wanted this to be a moving virtual piece, but obviously they had too many challenges. So we were like, okay, let's start with the basic. Let's just get a representation, a physical representation, a virtual representation of a physical still performance piece. So that's what we did. And then also, this is part of our Reclaim virtual exhibition. And basically when it's obviously a 360 virtual piece, so you can go around, which is quite nice. We added lighting. I mean, Chris McKinnon did this. And then we created this sphere, which is in the middle, which actually you can walk into it, and then you appear into a live, the video of a live performance. So I was like, okay, that feels a bit more performative, you know? So that's how I kind of like went around that piece. And then what you could see here at the exhibition is just a 3D printed piece of that. So it's like how I've been moving, you know, I think this is for me an example of a truly hybrid practice, from a live performance to a virtual piece to a sculpture. And I will keep developing it actually. Well, so the other one that is metaverse, we basically developed a 360 body tracking rig to digitalize the live performance, but also we need to calibrate it with the augmented reality software in order for the visuals to be a map to the body. So as you can see there, I mean, I don't know if you perceive it. I mean, this is just a GIF. If you want to see more, there is, you know, documentary about the whole thing online. But just, I don't have time to explain more. But yeah, basically the whole idea is that the visual are created by the present and the movement in real time, but they are all maps. So if the performer moves to the right, the visuals move to the right. And believe it or not, I mean, that's a challenge that needed to be solved. And then now we also have the possibility of moving the camera. So you can also move the camera around the performer, meaning that you can do totally immersive virtual reality performance experiences. So I'm quite proud about that one. We'll keep evolving. So yeah, Reclaim, I think for me so far, this is probably my favorite virtual exhibition we've done with Flux. It was supported by Arts Council of England too, and it was launched at National Gallery. And it's also Reclaim is related to accessible areas, in that it was the first exhibition that we were exploring accessibility and how to also like champion underrepresented artists. So the virtual space, it was designed by Chris. And I wouldn't go too much in the details because he's going to explain more, but just conceptually, I wanted to explain, we call it Reclaim. We were inspired on the Occupy Square movement and Black Lives Matter movement as an idea of like reclaiming a space like Trafalgar Square that is usually is pretty impossible to do an art exhibition unless you are like, you know, really selected. And then we were working with the National Gallery, but we were not allowed to exhibit with the National Gallery. So we were like, okay, how can we reclaim, you know, a space to be close to that so we can occupy virtually? And we actually quite liked that idea. And we intended to continue this idea of like occupying different squares in, you know, next to the main big institutions as a way of like reclaiming visibility for artists like us. And just to finish off, the only thing I want to say about this, that as with my piece, with many of their pieces, you have different levels to it. You have, for example, with Olive piece, it's a brainwave visualization, but then when you walk into the piece, you activate it and you see a sound, you hear a sound piece and a visual piece. So it's like, yeah, the idea of like meta, you know, artworks within artworks, which I quite like about this one. Oh, I forgot. So this one, it was, we did for the other art fair, and we used Can Matrix, which is the same platform that we used for the first one and the same platform that we use for the current one. We liked it, but in this one, we include already 3D objects, which is obviously a bit more complex, but we liked this. We thought it was like quite a simple way of translating physical exhibition into virtual exhibition, keeping the format of the walls and you know, like the idea that you journey through it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there. And I'm gonna pass it over to Afra. Yeah, time.
I'm gonna go really quick.
Yeah.
So basically, my practice, I make light sculptures normally. So in the other room, you will have seen an infinity cube and lots of lights bars, which is the global warning piece. So those are my artwork. So the first thing I did was I had all of them made in 3D. So by a 3D designer in Cinema 4D. So she recreated all of my pieces in virtual space. So that was the most basic thing I could do to translate the object into the virtual world. So that was great. So you can see the object in the virtual world, but it doesn't interact with you. And a lot of them do. These ones don't, but a lot of my works do interact with you. So what I then needed to do was bring some of the artworks into interactive game engines. So this piece is in 3JS. Which is also shown in the reclaimed exhibition. Actually, I don't know if that actually does interact, but in other pieces I've been doing with the Shemza Digital exhibition and artworks, you walk up to the artworks and they light up. So, I mean, it's not quite as though it's light, but you know, it's got that sense that you're interacting with the piece. And as Maria mentioned as well, there are these ways in 3JS as well that you can walk up to something and it takes you to an interactive painting app. So that's to do with the artwork that I've got in there as well, which is a screen that you can scan and it takes you to a painting app and then it projects that onto the screen. Maybe you've had a chance to have a go on it. So that was very quick. I'm just going to move straight forward because we don't have much time. So an access all areas here is a physical exhibition here in the space and also a virtual exhibition. And we've done that. We've used quite a lot of the same pieces that we've had kind of scanned in and made virtually for this show. And for the computer arts, so I'll just rewind, it's gone too quick and I've lost my track of thought. We've also got in this collection, which we're really excited about, is a new selection of limited, well, it's just a unique prints that are from our Art in Flux artists. And we have created these limited edition prints as an archive collection from Art in Flux. And then these prints are going to be donated to the Computer Art Society's public collection. So we're really excited as a way, Maria mentioned about reclaiming a space in Trafalgar Square and occupying the square and those kind of things, but being able to endorse and create that connection with our artists from historically excluded groups to now be part of such a major computer arts collection is really fantastic and exciting for us. So you can see those hanging. Tomorrow I'll be packaging them up and shipping them off to their new home at the Computer Arts Society. So very excited about doing that part of the event. And of course, we've also got our hybrid version. So you can see here, as Maria mentioned, it's using this Kunst Matrix platform. So if it's very easy and simple to use, so it's very quick and easy. So I myself, I do a lot of the web design and things for Flux and the newsletters. So I'm able to populate this very easily and straight. So whereas with Reclaimed, we needed the wonderful expertise of Chris McInnes, who will talk a little bit more later, to actually get that working in 3JS. Whereas this is quite easy, it's a drag and drop situation, so it's quite an easy thing to get started with. So I'm going to wrap it up. I think I'm just going to introduce our speakers, if that's okay, and there'll be a chance for Q&A at the end. So, but we'll let we'll let you ask questions to these speakers as they go along, if that's all right with everybody. So Danielle, we're so pleased to have you here. I'm just going to introduce you. So Danielle Braithwaite-Shirley is an artist working in animation, sound performance, and video games to communicate the experience of being a Black trans person. Their practice focuses on recording the lives of Black trans people and entwining lived experience with fiction to imaginatively retell trans stories. So I'm going to leave it to you to take it away, Danielle. Thank you so much for joining us from Berlin, I believe.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Can you let me share my screen, please?
Yes. Oh, can you not share it?
Not currently while you're sharing, no.
Okay. Just give us 1 second. The perils of a hybrid event.
Everyone
Sorry,
just breathe in and out. Just be patient with technology.
Have to stop
Make
sharing
host, yeah.
screen.
So
Make host, yeah.
yeah, this one, make host. Yeah,
We don't want to make. Do we?
yeah, he said we all speakers should be a host and then they can share.
Oh, all right. I'm a host now.
I think we need you to give that back to us if that's okay, but for now, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so hi everyone. Hope you're doing well.
Bye.
My name is Danielle Braithwaite-Shirley, and mainly what my practice is about, if this presentation works, there we go, is about archiving. And so I'm showing this image here. It's because it's the image that's foundational to my practice. It's an image of someone called Mary Jones, who was a Black trans woman in 1836, if I'm getting the date right. And this is the only recorded archive of her existence, as well as some testimony she gave in court. And it's a poster warning people away from her. And so the first thing that I wanted to do as part of my practice was to archive Black trans people in the present, using the kind of technical ability that I have to try and ensure that they're not erased from the archives and that their stories are told from a perspective of a Black trans person rather than archived through the violence that kind of erases them. And I'm greatly influenced by older video games. So this is Blade for the PS1. And at the time, I thought that when a representation of a human was in a video game, that human actually had to get physically scanned and a bit of their soul was placed inside of the game. So every time you were very bad and that they died, part of Wesley Snipes would die because Wesley Snipes played Blade. And this has kind of stuck with me. And so I've always kind of loved this older aesthetic, this very rudimentary 3D aesthetic. This is the Mentian Award for the 3D for the DS. And so this like very low poly, lo-fi aesthetic has really drawn me towards building work around this low poly, lo-fi way of building. And it's a much faster and iterative process to do it like this. As well as this is called Mawillo. This is by Muriel Tramis. It was made in 1987, the same year Super Mario came out. And this is a game about Martinique and a tale in Martinique. And so I just include this here all the time because I want to show that games were trying to archive stories from the perspective of people of color since the dawn of games. But there was a point where entertainment became the main kind of focus. And so what do I do? So mainly I work with people to basically translate their bodies into a 3D environment and try and tell their stories through a kind of digital environment. And so I build and construct the entire environment around them. I texture the world with images of them. And I'm just going to play you. I might have to reshare my screen just to make sure this works. As you can see, they sent me a video of them singing, and so I used the video of them dancing and converted it to this. And as well as that, usually to test out new technologies, I make music videos. It's something that I always do. I don't know why, I just can't stop doing it. But I put this in here because often people ask me, like, what technologies do you use and how did you get into them, and were you taught traditionally? And I wasn't for these, for tech. I taught everything myself. And the way I do it is that I try and not to put too much pressure on the first initiation, the first greeting of that tech, and just have a bit of fun. So this is the music video I made, just out a load of stuff. Fucking stunning. Look at me stunning. Turn my head to the left. Turn my head to the right. Stunning. Yeah. Fucking gorgeous. Everything about you is fucking gorgeous. Looking at how beautiful you are. Body, top, mind. Everything about you is gorgeous. I never lost sight of the order. Yeah. I got your friendship first and now I want you. And so that was using this, essentially I was testing two programs there. One was EVA Synth, which uses AI to take a frame of a video, allow you to draw over it, and then interpolate how the other frames may look. So it starts looking like a painting, as well as something called Virtua Cam, which allows you to use your phone as a camera in 3D spaces. So you get a more natural kind of holding camera state. Anyway, so I'm going to go on. So I'm going to go to the first kind of exhibition I did, which is my end of school exhibition. If this presentation loads, which looks like this. Okay, and so I show this because this was the last exhibition I did there was no interactivity in it. And the main point was talking about trying to wish that I could dig up and speak to Black trans ancestors. And so it's like a dream essentially that I had. But someone told me in this presentation that they really enjoyed my work because they can just take in the visuals and leave all the things I was talking about behind. And I hated that. And so after this, I decided that I wanted to make games and have people have to activate the work to get something out of it. And I feel really strongly about art no longer being passive and requiring people to put in work to get something out. And so the first game I actually tried to make was called Resurrection Land, and it was based around esports. And I'm a huge esports fan because I'm just a nerd. I'm a huge nerd. And so the idea of the game, which you can play at resurrectionlands.com, is it's how to explain it very quickly. The idea is that if you could scan the earth and bring back memories buried within the earth and have those memories become sentient, what would happen in our day and age of kind of tourism of identities, and how may those identities be exploited and those people in the past be exploited for companies' gain. So that was the aim of the game. And it's the remake of it because the original version I made, and you will all know this when you try and make an interactive work for the first time, was terrible. It was so bad that when I showed it, everyone fell through the earth and no one was able to play it. and it was awful. It was the worst experience ever. It's basically a game that was a mess. And so I had to remake it. And I love to talk about this because I don't think we talk about the idea of remastering a work, remastering tech works often enough. Something that they do within the gaming world is when they love a piece of work that is too old to play now, they remaster it for a modern audience. And I really think that often when we're building work with tech, the skills that we've learned along the way allow us to look back at works that we made in the past and actually create the vision that we initially wanted. And so the first version was terrible. I made it in Blender Engine and I remade it in JavaScript and made it an FMV game, and it worked so much better. And so I really think it's important to think about, at least from my perspective, to think about how we approach tech and how we also approach revisiting tech and not letting it go and die. And so the next work I made, and this is an install shot of the piece. Next work I made was We Are Here Because of Those That Are Not. Again, based around this image, but this was to be an interactive Black trans archive. So essentially, the things I don't like about archives is that often they're very inaccessible. You don't know what essentially you're looking for. If you go on an archive, it's very hard to find something that might just interest you. And there's a huge problem with archives about misuse of material. And so in this archive, the first thing that you had to do was choose your identity. And what identity you chose determined what you would see and what you had access to, and how you treated the archive made the game either longer or shorter, depending on how nice or bad or whatever you were. And so this was a turning point for me because it made me realize that not the work isn't just the work. The work isn't just the art. A lot of the art is in the audience's choices and the choices that they make. And I personally get a stronger satisfaction when the audience leaves thinking about what they did and the responsibility they have for what they saw, rather than that work was really nice. I really like them leaving with something in their heart. Often people tell me I made the wrong choice, and I'm thinking I didn't program a wrong choice, so I don't know what you're talking about. But like that reaction is really nice compared to someone just looking at my work for 5 seconds and saying that's a nice painting.
Yeah.
And these are some install of these I call these demon babies. So there's a lot of like physical and digital things kind of merged together in my work. I like doing this quite a lot. Something that I found, I spend like 13 hours a day in front of a computer. So it really is nice to have some physical practice as well. So this is something that came in later, but I really actually do like to kind of blow out these digital works into a physical realm. And I think it's one thing, okay, I am rambling, but one thing I will say is that I really consider digital works or digital spaces as different mediums. So I consider JavaScript a very particular medium, Blender a medium, all these things. And so when I make works, I list out the programs I use because those are the mediums that I use. And I feel that often we talk about translating a work into a digital work, but for me, I don't think that works because you're not respecting the separate medium that it is, and that you're working with a whole new medium, so it probably needs a whole new thought process, and you're going to create something amazing, but just in a completely different way. And you don't need to do a translation. You need to try and, I guess, learn the medium or look at the medium as a medium. And I don't think we ever talk about digital spaces as mediums. We instead talk about them as ways in which we can show and disseminate work and disseminate ideas. Try and get on faster. How am I doing for time? We got like 2 minutes left. Okay, we got 2 minutes left. I'm gonna run through it.
Yeah, you've got a couple minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes left. Last presentation. One of the games, early games, PS1, Spider-Man. Okay. This game really fascinated me because there was a fog on the bottom of the ground, and they made this because of a rendering limitation. They couldn't render a whole city on a PS1 game. So this fog kills Spider-Man, and the excuse is basically there's a fog. There's no reason it needs to be there. But for me, the Black Lives Matter protests were going about when I was revisiting this game. So I imagined the fog was being made by the Black Lives Matter protest as an atmosphere that only supported Black lives. And so Spider-Man died in the fog because he's not Black. And so I made a game about this in order to commemorate my friend's passing. And so I made a game about the bottom of that city, essentially, and about a city changing to accommodate particular people and what it means to go there, have a particular identity, and have this atmosphere become harder or easier to breathe. And you can go and play this at blacktransair.com. And quickly speaking about the domains are super important because I feel like it's where you get to claim space on the internet. Internet real estate is a huge thing. And I know Instagram is great and all, but it's not your space. It's someone else's space allowing you to market, and having domain names that are easily findable, as well as like easily linked to each work. So I have Black Trans C, Black Trans Air, Black Trans Archive, allows you to kind of carve that space out for yourself, for your own community, so they can easily find things that you're doing, so that you don't get lost amongst the algorithms that try and essentially suppress you. I think that's all my time I currently have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Danielle. Oh, you can't see me. Thank you so much. Absolutely wonderful presentation. I think really fascinating to me and interesting is the idea and concepts of the Blender being a medium, you know, that that JavaScript is a certain medium that, I mean, I was talking about translating a physical work into a virtual work, and it sort of loses something, you know, and when we were doing the works for the Reclaimed exhibition, we were then creating them in virtual space using that virtual world as our media, you know, like I thought that was really, really fascinating, and just the way that you move between these worlds as well. Does anyone have any questions for Danielle?
Oh, there was maybe afterwards. I think.
Or we do them after?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we'll come back. Thank you so much, Danielle. Amazing presentation. I'll pass over to...
Do I send the hosting back to you?
Oh, yes, please.
Who to? Art in Flux? Oh, no, you got it.
Yeah, there's 2 Art in Fluxes, I think. Oh, we've got it. Yeah, we've got it. Yeah.
This one is not only.
Yes.
You know when you have 2 minutes to.
I'm just quickly going to introduce Tanya. So Tanya is a PhD student at the University of Greenwich, and exploring the evolution of cyberspace in the net art practice. Her thesis working title is From Net to Art, the conceptualization of cyberspace within net art practices. Tanya graduated with an MA in Contemporary Studies and Curation at Westminster University, and was working at the Tate Exchange at Tate Modern. And now Tatiana is teaching at the University of Greenwich on digital studies. So without any further ado, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, forward. Yeah.
Technology. All right, hello everybody again. I'm going to talk a little bit about my project and about net art. So the project. So the working title, Spatial Aspects of Net Art and its exhibition practice, and the way sort of started with understanding what is net art, sort of what are the early stages of net art, and then how it moved, how it changed over the time. And that's why you have sort of this chapters at first, the jokey one that definition is not found, and I will explain why, and then we go to the early stages. I will talk briefly about the early stages of net art, and then moving to post-internet, and then web is back, and basically web is back. You see it's what Art in Flux did with this exhibition, where it's in hybrid space. You can look at it online, and then you also can experience it in the physical space. And what I found out during my research is that net art, even though it started as strictly digital movement, it's moving towards hybridity. So you can see a lot of physicality within it. And sort of within my research, I'm trying to understand why is it and what will be the best curatorial practices to show this type of art to the world, so everybody can understand it, everybody can participate with it, and so on. And then I'll briefly talk about one of the case studies I'm using for my research, which is the wrong. I don't know if you've heard about the wrong Biennale. It's quite an interesting project. It's been, I think, around 6 years, and it's gradually progressing with a lot of artists participating in it. So we'll start with the reason why there is no definition. You can first talk about the idea that net art itself is quite problematic terminology, because we can call it internet art, we can call it net art, we can call it art on the web. There are a lot of terms that you can use to explain this movement. And the reason for that is that internet is still progressing. And because net art was born on the internet, it's also still progressing. For example, if we talk about Renaissance, you know, the beginning and the end. So you sort of can form it, you can put the frames on it, you know, you can answer the question, what is Renaissance? But when we talk about internet art, you don't really have frames. That's what I found out over 3 years of doing this research, because in my first year, I was like, oh yeah, I know what is internet art. And then second year came and I was like, I don't know what's internet art anymore. So it's progressing. And of course, the reason for that is technology, because internet is changing. Now we are used in exhibitions a lot. So do we say that we are artworks? Is internet art? Or do we, you know, do not put that in that category? That question is sprouting. Then of course we have history with the idea of Web 2.0 developing, social network, all coming into play. And then suddenly net artists are not interested in technology that much, but in the social dispute that is surrounding the internet. So if we talk about the early stages of net art, and the first movement was called net.art, you can start talking about the idea of programming. So the artists were really playing with the coding language. This work, for example, from Mark Neptier is called the Shredder, and basically probably can't use internet here. Or can I?
I don't know.
I bet not. So basically, it's still working. You still can use that artwork, which is amazing. You can still play with it. And if you put any address into the search bar here, it will shred the website. Literally, it will take and make Google search, for example, look exactly the same. And for those few years of the internet growing, it was all about how we can manipulate the net. And the internet art was very easy to give terminology to, because it was literally one computer, another computer connection in between. And if that connection working, that's internet art. But then 2006 happened, where we have the idea of post-internet art forming. And that's all about suddenly social media. Internet stopped being novelty, everybody using it, you know, MySpace came into play, YouTube came into play. So suddenly everybody can go on the internet, socialize. It became all about me. Some people were talking about the internet is dead because creativity is died on the internet. So there were a lot of theories about that. So artists thought that we can change. So the artworks became more about protest, social ideas, how you can use internet to critique society, what's wrong with society, how we can change it for a greater good, and so on. And another interesting factor is that physicality became present in internet art works. As here you can see RTV, his artwork, basically at first he creates it on his computer, and then he makes a sculpture out of it that he places into the physical space. So suddenly we have this hybridity forming. But then, as you can see today, hybridity moving even further. So it's not only about artworks that have both physical and digital. And one of the reasons was, of course, to show it broadcast to bigger galleries and museums, but it also becoming about independent platforms, creating online exhibitions. And what I think is great, that finally public is okay to look at those online exhibitions from their screen and perceive them seriously, not just like, oh, well, another, thing. And we have a lot of them. Of course, pandemic gave a huge burst, and for me it was the crisis of my PhD, because I thought I have an answer, and then pandemic happened, and then everybody started to do online exhibitions, and I was like, no guys, no, okay, let me at first finish my research. But now I have this huge information, everybody is doing online exhibitions, and I'm even more confused about what is internet art, which is not helping at all. But finishing on
Yeah, I think you're absolutely fine, yeah.
one of the case studies, so I'm looking at Fields, probably you heard of them. They're amazing centers, so if you not do visit them, they do great projects. Arbeit, and the last one is the wrong, and they're called the wrong Biennale. And the idea is that they just position themselves against the Venice Biennale. So they're all online. They have some exhibitions that are shown in physical space, but the idea is that it's an open call. There is no, it's quite democratic if you want, because you know how Biennale works, right? Everything should be up to pristine. We only specific artists get there. Where with wrong, it's open call. Anybody can send the request to be part of the program of the wrong Biennale, and then it works as normal Biennale. So it hosted for 3 months, and the website itself works as sort of this huge hyperlink, as I call it, because everything is hyperlinked. It's very normal for 90s, but I think not normal for today, what we perceive as a normal internet website, because it's quite chaotic and it's all about links, and there's not a lot of intuitivity in where you press and how you go. But the idea is that they create embassies, digital embassies, where they create artists and then also assign a curators. And then the curators are free to do with their embassies whatever they want. So you can have normal websites where the artworks are shown. You can have virtual exhibitions or online exhibitions, as Art and Flux did, or you can also have metaverse galleries, which is now the main point of my research on gathering data on the wrong, because I'm trying to understand, first of all, what's the most used type of the gallery now? Is it just a normal website with artworks, or is it the online gallery? Or also how you measure metaverse galleries. And when I talk about metaverse galleries, it's when you build the world from scratch. So you don't have your normal traditional walls of a gallery space sort of put into the 3D, into online. It's where you absolutely build from scratch the universe. Like, you know, in computer games, the maps. And then on their maps, you put different artworks and you jump, you navigate with them, you sort of take part in this sort of game-like gallery metaverse space. So then the main question now I'm left with is how you measure them, how you understand the artistic creativity within that, how you make it more accessible to people to understand, to navigate, not to get confused by this new form of art. And yeah, and again, of course, the overarching question, is it all net art, or what is net art? And on this confusing point, I'm probably going to stop. Thank you very much.
Yes, let's do after questions afterwards, but you awaken so many more questions to me on board of it. Very interesting, and also it's fascinating to see how when you started your research, and how like obviously the pandemic it has been it opened up like many more possibilities in the virtual world, because also a lot more people were using it, but many more investments were thrown into that world. So yeah, it is very fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing your work and your research. Now we are going to go to our last speaker, Chris McInnes. Chris McInnes is the designer who has designed the Reclaim exhibition for Art in Flux, and he is a British-American artist, technician, and programmer raised in Sheffield. He uses a myriad of technologies and technical skills to unpick, poke, and test the complex planetary networks that bind together universal facts and local phenomena. This is really beautiful, actually. McInnes has used game engines, server deployments, multiplayer environments, physical computing, web scraping, and AI to tag at the meshwork of a network world. So if we have you there, Chris?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey. Hello, Chris.
You cannot share, so somebody has to stop sharing their screen, I think.
Yeah, I think.
You need to make him a host, I think.
Yeah, it's not me because we made the host as a.
So
Oh,
Danielle.
no, yeah, it's good now. No, it's good now.
Oh yeah, great.
I can do the thing.
Wonderful.
Give me a sec. Right. This will stop it. Yeah, that's fine. Blah blah blah. Share. Okay. Cool. Can everybody see that? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. I'm Chris. I'm going to start my timer so that I know what's going on. before I, right. Yep, I'm Chris. I'm a AV technician and computer programmer and also artist. I sort of bring all three terms kind of along in the same thing because I spend a lot of time working in galleries, not as an artist, but as a kind of labourer, and the sort of work I see myself and other technicians do is so creative and so obviously artistic, and is very rarely recognised as such. On a daily basis, we are bending and breaking the rules of what you are supposed to do with technology in order to help other artists realise their projects. So I always consider that as part of my artistic practice, and part of the artistic work I do is making other people's work, sometimes just installing it and sometimes from scratch. So I'm going to show a couple of projects where I've been a kind of programmer or a technician on it. The first one I wanted to share was something I did, I guess, quite a few years ago during the pandemic. Arbeit approached me and asked if I could develop a VR exhibition for them, because they had been organising this show with the National Gallery of Zimbabwe, but then, you know, travelling anywhere became quite difficult. So they came up with this idea of making a VR exhibition that they could then at least send the headsets, and then people, the exhibition became more mobile, but also meant that it could overcome the sort of border restrictions that were in place at the time. And so this involved the National Gallery in Zimbabwe sent me floor plans, scale plans, and I modelled the whole gallery space that they would have been showing in Blender, and then built it up into a VR kind of experience in Unreal, I think, if I remember rightly. I think it was in Unreal. It's quite an interesting one because it's generally quite ill-advised to use loads and loads of videos in game engines. It's not a very efficient way to use game engines, and you generally shouldn't do it. But that was, or not you shouldn't do it, but and that was exactly what I was doing on a headset that is essentially just a mobile phone processor. So that was quite interesting. It involved a lot of clever programming to make sure that things were kind of loading in the background and then unloading themselves, so I didn't overwhelm the memory of the device. And this is fellow, I believe Cumbrai is from Sheffield, fellow Sheffielder, if I've got that wrong, I'm sorry. Cumbrai Makumbe, whose work I really like. I really liked this piece of work. It's really cool. And they're doing great things now as well. So I just wanted to show that. This is, you've already seen this image several times. This was actually built using a game engine that I wrote on top of 3GS, because 3GS is just a rendering engine. It will render 3D graphics for you, and that is it. It doesn't do anything else. And this, I built a kind of sort of pseudo game engine on top, which allowed a high level of abstraction between game objects and between different interactions and so on and so forth. So it became very easy to build quite fast in, you had these kind of pre-made scripts that you then built on top of that I've made, and then an event system that kind of dealt with them all interfacing with each other without causing like mad conflicts, which allowed me to build this really quickly. The game engine I'd actually developed for another project that I was commissioned to do of my own work, which also had a multiplayer aspect. So this does actually have multiplayer capability in it too. Although, yeah, it's a complete headache, but anywho. I also do a lot of physical stuff. I really like being up a ladder or behind a wall, wiring something up in the dark. That's really enjoyable for me. and this is kind of a recent, really big project that I did with Arbeit, this 360 projection room using very consumer level projectors, which involves some sort of fun engineering, building custom mounts that allowed you to shift the projectors and so on and so forth. And me using 2 computers running After Effects at the same time to map all the projections. Definitely not the way you should ever do a 360 projection, but it worked really well, and it was an interesting challenge. And I worked for lots of other artists and galleries beside this, as well as kind of teaching programming too. But seeing as I've only got 4 minutes and 20 seconds left, I'm going to move on to my own work. I've always been sort of really interested in technology. I'm a self-taught programmer and CGI person and so on and so forth. I think my main obsession is just learning how to do things, especially things that seem hard. And sort of doing stuff with coding is kind of just really sort of like fires my brain in quite a nice way. Really sort of my early work is very interested in the kind of system of the networks, kind of how things travel through it and so on and so forth. And I think for a lot of kind of tech artists, programmer artists, that inevitably leads to kind of like, well, what's happening, you know, at the physical terminals? Like how does this kind of affect the real world? What happens in the real world once this stuff kind of goes to ground places? And I think that kind of led me sort of first to making these very abstract technological works that are looking at kind of a holistic picture of the way the internet works, but then sort of led me out of there to a more sort of social history and history of the internet and the things that underpin it. And this is the multiplayer game I was talking about before, that is a kind of based on a place in Sheffield, an area I grew up, in which you're sort of like dealing with like asynchronicity, which is an inherent thing kind of within programming, especially network programming. But in this case, you're building cairns, which you then leave for other players. And this was running off because it's a multiplayer game, it's running off this server that I built on the left. It's not anymore because I got kicked out of my studio where I had a port to the outside world, but you can still play it. I got it backed up somewhere else. And I kind of continued down this sort of path where I think I overdid it on the code at some point and just kind of needed a break. And at the same time, I was sort of getting more and more interested in less in the sort of shiny kind of superficial surface of a lot of the sort of technology we see around us, and more in the kind of underpinning sort of histories and theoretical underpinnings and where they came from, which sort of led me back to Sheffield as a post-industrial city. It was very reliant on steam, and I became quite obsessed with this because steam and the Industrial Revolution has such an effect on the social history of Sheffield, and the identity of how people understand themselves, and in a place that has historically experienced a lot of economic suffering and as a result social suffering, and how this same thing that generated that also generated chaos theory, which became network theory and cybernetics, and these things sort of kind of form these technologies that are perhaps quite exploitative and cause a great deal of harm to the environment and to people and to people's sense of themselves, then sort of form the bedrock of the kind of technological infrastructure we use to kind of frame our society now, and how that might perhaps lead to sort of some complications. So this work, it's not as obviously computational as maybe some of the other stuff I'd done, but it's just 3 Raspberry Pis that are all networked. Oh, that's me. I'll finish my sentence though.
Definitely.
It's just 3 Raspberry Pis that are networked, and they control little lights, the little 3D printed lampposts light up and stuff, and this one of the warehouses splits in half, and so on and so forth, and videos turn on and off, and so there's nothing like, it's almost like being the opposite of kind of what we think of when we talk about technology, but there is something kind of analogous between this sort of like, I don't know, middle-aged man in a garden shed diorama kind of railway stuff, and the sort of modeling of AI and so on and so forth. They're both forms of models, and they share like a sort of kind of some of their space with each other, and it's this obsession with like oversight and control and sort of mastery. And I think I'll probably leave it at that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks to all the speakers. We have time for some questions. Yeah, so please, any questions for any of the 3 speakers? Or observations, or your own experiences you want to share, or thoughts that you have? Yes, please.
Well, it's brilliant what they're doing. Can they make a living out of this? How do they get on?
Can you make a living out of it? Well, we've got actually, a researcher, artist, full-time artist, right? Danielle, you're a full-time artist.
Yeah.
And yeah, and Chris McKinnis here, who is artist and designer. So maybe who wants to answer?
The question was, can you make a living out of it?
No.
Does anyone want to
Yeah, I think you can definitely make a living out of it. At least for me, it's similar to making a living if, as any artist. It's similar difficulties as well. And there's a lot of, especially in tech, there's a lot of, you're going to meet a lot of people that don't understand what you're talking about half the time, and sometimes a lot of the work is selling an idea that people don't understand. At least that I found personally is that like I have to talk about the idea in a way that makes sure that everyone can understand it, and it's about making sure that you're clear. It's not about like it's not dumbing down anything at all. It's just being clear in how you present your idea to someone, because often with tech you need help to build it. But also before, when I didn't have anyone to help me, it was like one of the best things about making tech art for me was that I could put it online and it's always there for show forever. I don't have to rely on anyone to come and ask, do you want to show something? Because I had started building websites using Twine, which is super easy to use. And it's my first program I started using, I think, to build games by myself. And so you can definitely make a living from it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like just the easiest thing in the world, but I wouldn't say it's any harder than any other medium. It's just about knowing how to talk about your work and pitch it. That's the thing I really hate. You have to pitch it, at least that I found. Like so much, because you're like, oh, I want to make an interactive podcast. Like, oh, okay, cool. What's that? What is that? And you're like, all right, okay. Yeah. And then you have to kind of like talk a lot about like a vision, selling a vision, rather than when you have a painting, it sells itself because you can see it. But when you have tech work, you sell a vision of an experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like to add also to this that is interesting. I think within the media art world, obviously it is more challenging, I think a little bit more than normal fine artists, only because you need more resources. So that means actually in general, you need tech, you need hardware, so that means producing an artwork, it'll be more expensive. unless, that's why, for example, in my case, I always do things in open source. And obviously, if you do everything digital, then it becomes really, really cheap, But I think, it's challenging. Being an artist is challenging, but we are all making a living from it. So, hey, So I think that's
Also, I don't know if I'm just speaking for myself, but I think it's something that's changed post-pandemic, whereas there used to be media art used to be something that's so different to art, whereas now it's for once the big institutions are listening and are actually almost nervous about kind of catching drift of what media art really is. And it feels like there's a new openness that, at least personally, I hadn't experienced that much before. I think for me, it feels like something seismic is shifting. I don't know, what you think?
That's very interesting you should say that, Olive. And I was thinking also, particularly about Chris, the way he was talking, that this is extending the word hybrid much further. We're not talking about hybrid media anymore, about hybrid mind. Because Chris seemed to represent that kind of way that is no longer thinking like I'm an artist, I'm an engineer, I'm a software programmer, I'm this, that, or the other. I'm a model maker and I'm a bloke in a shed. I like making things that look like toy engines. But in all of these different factors and facets of what intrigues him and drives him, and I find that fascinating because it seems to summarize and kind of be a model of what hybrids should be. So when I see that as something that's going to be particularly challenging for institutions to take on board, because they're not comfortable with the idea of people coming out of the back room and announcing they've actually got something to say, because there's a kind of, we're challenging a pecking order there as well, because Chris is both the technician who helps you do stuff, but he's also somebody with ideas of his own. So he might be the man at the front rather than the man in the back room.
And that extends to yourself, right? But also to Danielle, to Maria, to Afra. We're all kind of combining physical work with engineering, with artistic practice. And it's interesting that it connects back to this idea of Renaissance that you brought up, right? This idea of like the Renaissance man, and that actually they're not necessarily different fields.
We are the Renaissance people.
Chris, do you have anything to say just on, could you hear Paul talking then about on you? Yeah.
I mean, I think I should sort of simplify it a bit in a way, because I don't make any money from my work, and that's for a multitude of reasons. Some of them are, I don't have a very good attitude in terms of like being a professional practitioner, and some of them are I don't know, I just struggle. I've always struggled with it. I'm absorbed in the making, and I'm not good at the marketing side. And I think this being a technician really solved a lot of problems for me, where I need to make money. I don't have the sort of luxury of practicing without making some money somewhere. And being a technician sort of gets me out of the studio and stops me from going mental in the studio, and B has made working with technology very accessible, because I'm sort of, not only am I getting someone else to pay for the technology, I'm also getting someone to pay me for messing around with it and working with it, and it's kind of, I think not everybody necessarily even wants to make money from their work. I certainly don't, because I know I couldn't deal with the pressure that comes with that. And the thing I'm thinking about most is like, how do I sort of sustain an art practice? And I think my sort of conclusion over the years has been that attaching my art practice to like a need to make money or satisfy other people's expectations in some way, whether that's real or imagined, is not a way for me to make my art practice sustainable. So I've kind of like split the two down the middle and partition the money making side. So yeah, I suppose it is hybrid, but it's also just like pure logistical sort of necessity.
I've got a question to Danielle, actually, which is about archives. I was wondering if your archive or your process in creating an archive, if you've been speaking to other people hosting an archive, or if there's been any interest by any institutions to embrace that, because I feel from you've been talking quite a bit about the need to be independent, to host your own domain. Yeah, I was wondering if there's also maybe a need to interconnect or to connect up with bigger institutions.
I don't feel I need to do that, but for this particular archive, I don't want to do that. I think it's important that the domain stays within the community. We own everything on there, so we know what's happening, what happened, how to fix it, or especially how to fix it, because it's already been broken like 10,000 times. It's not. I didn't make it to sell it or to pass it on or something like this. I made it for the community, and the only thing we're doing with it is doing DLC, adding more things to it basically, and going to different countries and just adding people, because I just want to add more people. Like the archive taught me like a lot about similar, like not every piece you need to treat the same, and some pieces are way more personal than others. And so this piece is like, I add to it because I care about the people involved, and I don't think I did a good enough job the first time, so I want to do a better job now, and I want to remaster it and revisit everyone I archived in 5 years or 10 years, and so that I can remake the archive in the present, but re-follow up the lives I was trying to record, so maybe I would do a better job. But I did speak to some other archives, like I spoke to the digital transgender archives in America to see how they were doing it and the problems they had and how good it was and all this kind of stuff, and how they got funding, because they get a lot of funding. So yeah, it's a weird one. It's a really weird one when you're making work that, because I feel like a lot of digital work sometimes has more than one use rather than just being art. And sometimes it has a larger use in the community than it does in the art world. And that's way better, at least personally for me, I feel. I always say personally for me as if I'm hurting someone, but you know.
Thank you. I think we probably have to.
Yeah, I've got, I think maybe one more question we can take. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one question for you, actually.
Yeah.
Could you describe a few examples of some metaverse galleries that you thought is interesting? Just to get a little bit of an idea of what is going on in that world.
I think we're going to what you were talking about, pitching the idea and selling a vision. It's very hard to explain when I can't just click a link and show you on the screen. But so how you can divide them, and I think some of the wrong ones, what they're doing now, because they finished showing the show, like the Biennale is finished, but what they have on the website, if you go to literally therewrong.org, you would see that they have this sort of online version where they broadcast everything that was shown, and some of them are metaverse galleries. But the idea is that, so mention the artworks, some of them are just like your normal art, some of the 3D sculptures, like what you did, right, with the performative art. And then instead of what I found that the artists don't like to put, or curators don't like to put borders, so that virtual place with no borders, but with different textures for the ground. So it's not your normal cement or whatever, but it's like an interesting, I don't know, have you ever played No Man's Sky? Do you know or any space game? So imagine a space game.
I can imagine.
So it is, it's the idea that you don't see a normal way of materials. So you don't see a normal white walls, you don't see a normal carpet, pavement, whatever is on the ground. So they play with the geometry because the rooms are weird. What also I noticed that when you talk about metaverse galleries, it's that they don't really put your normal geometry, like square is for the room. It's more about like round geometry, or the rooms that do not hold the normal idea of physics. And I don't know anything about physics, but take my word for it. But yeah, the idea is the very vivid shapes that go, and then you have arts presented into them, and usually you have some overall idea of the gallery. One of them was talking about the cyberspace and the idea that sort of a new society that can be built, this utopia idea of the cyberspace. And then, you know, you enter that gallery, you don't see borders, you just see the ocean, but then the ocean is not your normal one. It's made out of polygon structures, you know, and then you walk and there is in the middle the sphere, and you talk with the sphere, and it has the mechanical voice that leads you to another room, and then you communicate in another room with a hologram.
Like almost like you go through levels of the computer game.
Exactly,
You go to the next level, the next level.
Yeah. That's I think what's going in there more and more of them.
I wanted to also mention to you when you were talking about net art, and I was, and you finished your presentation with the question of like what it is net art for you, and I wanted to share a couple of I guess a couple of examples of like I guess collective digital creation. And for me, that was like, I was thinking that's kind of like the ultimate net art, because it's like people from different, you have like people from different places around the world that they are connecting in the virtual online world, and they're creating an artwork together. And I've seen some great examples with like performance, some other great examples with kind of digital painting, you know. And I think, I don't know, like for me, actually, like that's because maybe I don't think about it anymore as like something that is on the net. It has to be created on the net for it to be net art. But
yeah,
reflection. I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Which
But I think what I think was very interesting about the criteria, what we were saying. I think nowadays there are no more criteria. I think Lev Manovich, who is also on media art, the writer and the professor, he was saying that he hates the idea of criteria, because why we always need to put everything into the tick. And I think today with the internet, because you know it's so globalized, we can go and jump on several ideas at once. I think this idea of that art is this and that, or I don't know, expression is this and that. I think that the idea of criteria is going away step by step. You can't have just, you know, a rule book that we tick, and then it's like, okay, I have this and this and this, that's why it's net art. I have this and this and this, that's why it's performance art. I think everything is connected, and that's where hybridity coming from. And I think hybridity is the next criteria.
yeah. And I think also like when you know, let's remember that art is all about expressing, about freedom, and actually new mediums and media art allow us that, so we shouldn't be constrained, you know. I think it should be about expanding. But I think that's for tonight, right?
We have to wrap up.
Yes.
I was wondering if we could bring the slides up one more time.
Just for the last event.
Yeah, for the last bits. So basically, we just wanted to invite you to explore the virtual exhibition as long as it's still up. So we're closing tonight, really. And so tomorrow is going to be the last day also for Access Area. So if you have time to explore it, please feel free. A lot of the works that we've talked about are on there. And also we wanted to invite you to please evaluate it and give us your feedback, what you think about it, if you think there's ways to improve it. So there's an evaluation survey that we have on Survey Planet. So if you can, it would really mean a lot to us if you were to just leave your notes there. So please feel free to use the QR code to give us your feedback. I'm just going to leave it on for a second. And then we've got more events coming up. So yeah, obviously this has been a social, but we have our next event just around the corner. And yeah, maybe actually I'll hand over to
So next event is with the National Gallery. So we're finally going back into the space to do a physical event, but we are hosting a public live stream of that performance event because capacity is incredibly tight in the gallery. So we've only got 30 seats in there. So it's a very small space. So we would like to invite you to come to the live stream. So there'll be performances by Chematica, by Annalima Group, and also Augustine Lauder will be doing a 360 sound performance and exhibition as well there. And we also have a film event coming up at the Barbican Centre.
Yeah,
You wanna
yeah.
say something about that?
Yeah, so we have, it's the first time Martin Flux is curating a film event, and it's gonna be for Barbican Center, celebrating an art exhibition by Caroline Cinema. And we have called it Radical Embodiment, and we are exploring the politics of gender and the kind of rituals of embodiment. And we are gonna have an open call for that exhibition. We have one space, and we wanna open it up to upcoming artists. So as also, I don't know if you wanna finish.
Oh yeah, no, there's a second QR code. So this one is if you wanted to submit your work, or that's students who might be producing work, animations, filmic work, specifically on the theme of radical embodiment, gender, and performativity and ritual, then please feel free to submit. There's also an exhibition that is coming up just after this at Ugly Duck on the 24th of November is the opening day. And this work will also be shown there. So please feel free to submit that.
And we'd
Yeah.
just like to say thank you all to you. For coming.
Yes,
Thank you very much to the British Computer Society for hosting us. Thank you very much to our fantastic speakers online.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for coming. I'm afraid that we don't have any more time for mingling. We have to leave the office. Just because last time we were 8 and we pulled off, so we're gonna be on time today. But thank you.
Thank you.
Because we don't say that. I'm saying it. It's like in the French, I'm getting it.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yes, it's like,
Oh, yeah. I was thinking, I decided, I often do. I thought, well, once I won't.